Hey everyone, Model Man Frank here. How are we doing today? Hope you all had a great and wonderful weekend. Um, Everything was really good on my end. Just got to spend some time with my brother, and um, it was a lot of fun. We He was here for the 24 hours of lemons. That's a story in itself that we could have a chat about on a different date. Today's conversation is going to be about the 767. If you guys are watching this on playback, please make sure you hit the thumbs up button. And if you're not subscribed, please subscribe now. Make sure you hit the bell icon. It'll alert you when I go live. If you would like to follow me on Patreon, again, on Patreon, it is free to join. And if you want to see more content, you can provide a donation and help me out. This, it helps out a lot, a great deal, and I'm still going to continue to do these live sessions, but it does help out a little bit if you're able to help me out a little bit also. If you follow, I always get this wrong, huh? If you follow the photo here, Model Man Frank, it'll take you to my Patreon page. There, I do a lot of posting of photos. There are some items that of course, you have to subscribe to and join, and you're able to see everything on Patreon. I don't have a social media account such as Facebook or Twitter or whatever the heck it's called, X, and I'm not on Instagram. I do everything either YouTube or Patreon. Those are the only two places I am. And it benefits you because it's for creators like myself who like to have a little fun putting these little talk sessions together. So let's get started. Tonight's broadcast is about the 767 and the 777. Two aircraft. One I've never flown on. Maybe someday in the future I will. The other, I have flown on it. And it was actually developed in the 1980s. The 767 was developed at the same time as the 757. The 757 was developed again in the 1970s. And the 767 was developed for that next generation of aircraft that was coming out. Boeing saw something that they needed to have to compete with other wide-body aircraft like the DC-10 and the DC-10 and the L-1011 that was already out and flying on long-haul services with different airlines. So the 767, as it was being developed, shared some of its traits with the 757. Specifically, the aircraft actually had a flat panel screen, and it also shared the windshield of the same aircraft. So the 757 and the 767 shared the same cockpit style nose with the same windows, as you can see in this photo here. The 767 was part of the 7X7 program. Boeing was at that time period where they had just introduced the 757, and the 767 was going to fill that gap between the 777. I'm sorry, the 767 and the 747. It was designed to complement. It had a abreast, so it was 2 seats, then 3 seats in the center aisle, and then 2 seats again. So it was a wide body aircraft at that aspect. The 767 was going to be coming out with either a choice of Pratt and Whitney's, mostly Pratt and Whitney's engines. They were going to be the JT9D, and then they were going to be later upgraded to the 4000 engines. United Airlines was going to be the first customer to purchase this beautiful airliner that was going to be coming out. And also something that it was going to be featuring would be a glass cockpit. The 767 was the very first aircraft to have a glass cockpit. Also, they were doing some subtle changes in the terms of the way, like the setup inside the aircraft itself. With the 727 and the 747, Boeing always had their cockpits be like a gray with a green interior. And this aircraft was going to have a new setup because they saw that the way colors were going to be inside the cockpit, brown for some reason, I know, is a subtle color. So they chose that color based on how it would present itself flying with the screens and with the nighttime. I don't really understand how to describe this color. Boeing had changed to this color scheme in the interior cockpit because of that reason. So with everything that was coming out, Boeing decided their new airliners from the 757 up. So as we started going from the 757 into the next generation of aircraft, they were going to introduce glass cockpit. As you can see with this aircraft, the glass cockpit was very prominent. You still had old analog gauges as a backup because FAA required it. They were not going to get rid of analog gauges because, let's face it, your crystal cockpit can, it has been proven that a lot of the digital displays can fail. But the pilot inside, the flight crew needs to remember to use those analog gauges that are inside, and they're there for them to be able to fly the plane safely. So the 767 was going to be an all-glass cockpit. It also certified with an ETOPS rating of 120 minutes. Now, if you don't know what ETOPS means Extended Range Twin Engine Operation Performance Standards, which means is if the aircraft were to lose one of two engines, okay, it would have up to 120 minutes for this specific series of aircraft, have 120 minutes to get to its next an area closest to be able to fly and land. And that aircraft was critical for that rating to happen. So Boeing started to deliver the aircraft to United Airlines. The very first flight for the 767, sorry, I do apologize. I have a little bit of notes here. The 767's first flight, oh boy, I had it written down here and I can't believe I forgot, was in 1980. Bear with me one moment here. The 767 first flew in the 80s, and then it started going into delivery right away. Very critical thing that happened with the first flight was September 26th of 1981 for the 767. That was the first flight. And then first deliveries were September 8th of the following year, in 1982. It went into service with United Airlines. Very interesting with this aircraft. This aircraft actually was going to be slated to replace other older aircraft that were flying for the military, but it wouldn't be until later on. One of the aircraft in question would be the KC-135. KC-135 was already getting to be very old. It was already getting to be an aircraft that was outliving its time. Remember, the KC-135 was introduced in the late 1950s. It was already 1980s, and it was 30 years old. Pretty old for an airplane, but it was an aircraft that needed to be changed out. So, under the military designation, the 767 would be known as the KC-46. I'm sorry, the KC-46. And then the KC, it would also be known, it would also replace the E3 early warning system. You would have the KC-46 Pegasus and the KC-767, which would be a refueling version. As you can see, these are the old color schemes on the 767 when it first was introduced into the United Airlines livery scheme. One airline that never purchased this aircraft was Eastern and Boeing Pan Am. There was already shaky ground going on with Eastern and those two major companies. But Delta Airlines, American Airlines purchased a lot of 767s, and they were always they were shiny aluminum. They had a clear coating on them, and it was a very shiny aluminum. Sober fact was a 767 was the very first aircraft to hit the World Trade Center, the North Tower, on 9/11/01. It hit the World Trade Center, the offices of Cantor Fitzgerald, and it, as we all remember, many that are my age will remember that day, and many who are younger than me, you can look up what happened on 9/11 online, but it was a very sobering day. If you were born after 9/11, ask your parents to explain to you what happened that day. But it's something that will live in my memory for many, many years to come, and it's sobering to understand what will happen, what has happened after the ramifications of that day. But 767 and the 757 were used on 9/11 to do those horrendous acts of terrorism that brought our country to its knees for that time period. So the 767-200 came out. It was 216 seats again, a 2-3 setup. It had a range. The 767-200 had a range of 3,900 miles. Okay. Later on, as time progressed, the 767 changed, and it had a different. They actually added, it was a 300 ER, which was a 300 extended range. They also added winglets to the later models of the 767, flying with American Airlines, and some of the older models actually had gotten that upgrade also. I'll show you what an interior shot of a 767 looks like. I do believe that this is a Continental Airlines interior. I'm not exactly sure if anybody has ever flown on the 767 and has seen this color scheme. Please let me know and leave a description. So, as you can see in this photo, okay, it's two on each side of the cabin, and then you had three in the middle. So if you were a family of five, everybody was going to get a chair. It'd be wonderful. You had three classes. You would have a business class in the front, then maybe a first class, and then coach seating in the back. Seating was pretty well appointed. The 300ER, which was the extended range model, which you could take from, let's say, I don't know, like from Los Angeles to California, I'm sorry, Los Angeles to Hawaii or Anchorage, was the extended range model and had a 181 seat capacity. So it wasn't as many seats, but you got a longer distance of range. It was 65, almost 6,500 miles. You could fit 218 passengers, but of course the amount of people would go down. The 767-400 model was a 245 passenger capacity. Operating rate for the 200 series was 80,000 pounds. Okay, the 400 series, which would be later on ending the 767 different ranges, would be 103,000 pounds. The aircraft had a top cruising altitude of 35,000 feet with a Mach 0.80 speed on this plane. Wingspan on the 767s, on the 200 all the way to the 300 freighter series, was 156 feet 1 inches. And you had a wing area of 3,050 square feet. It had a 6-degree dihedral in the 6-degree swept back of the wing, and a dihedral of the 6 degrees up. So you had 31.5 on the sweep back, and then 6 degrees on the dihedral itself. So the 767, when it first came out, its first customer was United Airlines. When the 200 series ER came out, it was El Al. And then the 767-300 and the 300 ER. The ER version was American Airlines. So when the ER version came out, it was American Airlines because they were going to be using it. Japan Airlines purchased a number of them, was also a 300 series. UPS became a large consumer of the freighter version, and so did DHL. DHL didn't buy too many, but they needed to replace their aging DC-8 fleet. So the 767 filled that complementary to be able to be added to replace those aircraft. UPS also was replacing their A300 aircraft and some of their DC-10s that were flying. And Continental Airlines also was a launch customer for the 767-400. Now, the aircraft performed really well as a airliner. It was, how to say it, it was a stepping stone for what was next to come. So we were going into the next generation of things to come from Boeing. Show you a photo here of what the... So Delta Airlines had some 767s. I mean, they were still painted up in the old color scheme, but as Delta Airlines progressed, and you'll actually see some 767s now flying with the newer color scheme. This is an old color scheme. If you're watching this and you probably never saw this scheme, this is a retro color scheme. When it first came out, 767s were painted in this color scheme with Delta Airlines. My wife worked for Delta Airlines. I worked for Spirit, which was a low-cost carrier, and some other airline later on, Falcon Airways. But I took the 767 from New York to Atlanta. I'm sorry, it was a 727 from New York to Atlanta, Atlanta to Denver, Colorado. I took it. So I went to go see my cousin who was getting married at the time, and my flight back was a 727. I'm sorry, a 767, and I flew from Denver to Chicago O'Hare, and then from Chicago to New York's LaGuardia Airport on a 727. So I've been on this plane before. Um, when I went out to the West Coast to look at some schools when I was in high school, I flew on the 767 from JFK to San Francisco Bay Airport, and it was we went on American Airlines. On that flight, I don't know what it's like today. I think you don't get a lunch and a dinner. We got breakfast and we got lunch, and it was a full meal. It was very good. This plane was very roomy, very well appointed inside. The seating was very comfortable. Um, First class had very good leg room. If you ever get a chance to follow Noel Phillips on his treks across the world on different airlines, I think he does fly on a 767 on one of his videos, and you may want to take a look at some of this. Um, Something new has happened. Boeing Aircraft just um, made an announcement that the 767-400ER freighter version is going to be developed, and it's going to be one of their main customers is going to be uh, Boeing Aircraft. FedEx. FedEx is going to be purchasing a lot of their aircraft to replace the DC-10s, their MD-11s, and I believe they had A310s or A330s. I believe. I'm not exactly sure. But yeah, they were going to be purchasing, and that's on the Boeing.com website, which I'll put a description in the. I'll put a link in the description box below so you can read that video, read that site. So, as I was saying, the military version of the 767 is the KC-46 and the KC-767. And the military version was going to be. So the U.S. military was going to be getting this aircraft, but first of all, I believe Italy was the first ones to get theirs, and some of the other countries out, and then slowly, we would be going to a country that basically our America would be getting their aircraft. But this is where the 767 would basically be shining. It'd be taking over the legacy of the KC-135, and it was. Sorry, I'm reading the description box. Roots of E. Yes, it is Happy Sunday, and it is a good Boeing conversation. But yes, the 767. Italy has some beautiful colors on their planes. I mean, I really mean it. I mean, when they really put effort, they put some really beautiful colors, especially that color scheme that you see there with the tail with the Italian flag colors. This is the KC-46 Pegasus, which is the 767 or the KC-767 fueling a B-52 bomber, and that was going to be what Japan ordered a E3 or E6, I think it is now going to be known, as it's going to be their early warning, their E3 model. It's a 767 with a radome on top, and that's going to be their early warning aircraft. The U.S. military should be taking delivery of theirs soon. I haven't seen any photos, so I wasn't able to add any photos to this lineup on this channel. But I'm sure within the next couple of years we'll be able to see them. They'll probably be at air shows also. And as we go into the next millennium, the decades are changing. So the 767 was the stepping stone for the 7X7 program. The next aircraft we're going to talk about is the 777. The 777 was actually conceived from the 767 program. Very interesting. The 767 was still a test bed for the 777 in terms of how items were going to be added. 777 was a 21st century jet airliner. When the 777 was first thought of, Boeing was going to build the aircraft as a tri-jet. The tri-jet version, I mean, I don't know if you could actually imagine what the 777 would look like, but this photo right here, could you imagine the 777 coming out looking like that? So the 777 was going to come out looking like a DC-10, and what happened is Boeing's thought process behind the 777 was they needed to compete against the DC-10 and the L-1011 flying at the time, and they really didn't know what to do at that time period with the aircraft coming out. So they designed this plane with 3 engines. I mean, right there, that 777, the 777 in the 3-engine model. I mean, we could just imagine what would have happened if that had happened. But I guess we never got that chance to really see what was going to be happening with that aircraft. So the 767 and the 777, yeah, I don't see a 3-engine aircraft happening anytime soon. So the Boeing team went to work, and when Boeing started looking into the aircraft, now the concept of building a plane, the 777 was the first airline to be designed using CAD, which was computer aided design. It was going to be the first plane to come out with a CAD design. The whole plane was going to be designed on a computer, and it was going to be a multinational aircraft. So the 777 itself, I believe Japan or China was going to be building the tail section, and there was going to be parts of that aircraft coming from many different countries, all converging in Seattle and being built there. The aircraft was going to have 3 classes with 301 passengers, 10 abreast seating. So it was going to be three seating, 10 abreast, 3 classes, and it was going to be set up in you're going to have 301 to 368 passengers on this aircraft. Max takeoff weight was going to be 550,000 pounds. The engine that was going to be designed for this aircraft was going to be a very large aircraft engine. It was going to be the largest of the largest jet engine built to date. Remember, nobody had actually. Boeing was looking towards the future. They knew that eventually 4-engine planes were going to go away. 3-engine aircraft were going away. The design team and the production team knew that eventually things had to change, and we needed more fuel-efficient aircraft out there. So, as things were going on, things had to change. So, away was going to be the new aircraft that were going to be coming out, the Pratt & Whitney GE90 engine. The GE90s were a big engine, And I'm going to show you one here. I've got a photo here for you guys, and I'm just trying to look it up. I do apologize for taking so long. I had that photo up before, and I don't know where I did with it. Interesting. But yeah, so the GE90 was going to be a huge aircraft. You could stand inside the engine of this aircraft. And there was going to be the GE90s, and then Rolls-Royce was going to be producing aircraft also. Was also going to be producing an engine for this plane. So to date, the military has not bought a 777 yet, but we were going to have our first. So Boeing thought ahead. They started computer designs right away, and the very first flight for the 777 was going to be happening soon. First flight was going to be on June 12th of 1994. When that happened, the aircraft was rolled out, and that was the first flight. It took off from Everett Field, flew for about an hour. They were able to retract the landing gear safely and effectively. Launch customer was going to be United Airlines. So again, Boeing first customer, launch customer, was going to be, as we saw with the 767, was going to be United Airlines. And it was a beautiful color scheme that they came out with for that aircraft. So the plane came out, and they came out with such a gorgeous color scheme. It was gray on top, blue on the bottom. It was a dark gray and a dark blue on the color. And now the United colors are, of course, United Continental. It's, you know, it's like this one right here, this Twin Otter that I have, which is blue and white. It's kind of like, color schemes nowadays are not the same, you know. They just don't. Nah, I wouldn't call them. You know. They just don't look the same. You have to go overseas to see some of the really funky looking color schemes that people have put out for planes, but I haven't seen anything like this before. So when Boeing thought of this plane, they were going to look at it as a massive scale airplane. Right here is the size of the GE90 engine. It's a huge engine. It was going to be the largest airplane. It was going to be a very large, wide-body aircraft with a big engine to be able to do that ETOPS rating. Okay? So remember what we talked about. ETOPS rating, extended range, twin engine operations, performance standards. Boeing planes, first flight, they were already doing testing. The first company to purchase the 777 was going to be United Airlines. When they designed the plane, it was going to be a wide-body aircraft, big engines, and it would be able to travel a farther distance. So they already thought in their head, okay, the 747 is going to go away, and this aircraft is going to take over its flights. So primary airlines for the new wide-body was going to be Air France, British Airways, Emirates, KLM Airways, and United Airlines. United Airlines was going to be the first ones to take possession of the 200 series, and that aircraft got an ETOPS rating of 180 minutes. So if one of the engines went down, it had 180 minutes to find a new landing area. After the 777-200 flew, the 200ER, which was an extended range aircraft, would get the first flight on October 7th, 1996. entered service with British Airways. British Airways had beautiful colors at that time. And again, the 777 had the largest, not only the largest engines at that time, the GE90, which you see here, but also a bogie system. So up until that time, big planes had extra wheels, like the 747. The 747 not only had three mains, but it actually had extra wheels in the back. I'm sorry, I got a picture of one right here. Not a picture, I'm going to show you actually the model. So you had extra wheels to support the weight of that plane coming in for landing. If you look at the A380 when it comes in for a landing, it's got these extra bogie wheels on the bottom of it. So Boeing thought about this and said, we got to reduce the weight on these planes. And if you look at just behind that young man, you can see the landing gear. It was going to have the largest tire produced to date on this plane. It was going to have 6 wheels on each landing gear. And then, of course, you had the front two nose gear, which is going to be a standard nose gear. But the back landing gears were going to be a 3 wheels on each side. And it was going to be, that way it was able to spread out that weight. So you had the spread out of the weight on the 767. So the 767 had 6 wheels on each landing gear set, on each wing landing gear, and it was a huge plane. You could actually go to any airport now, and when you watch something like this thing take off, you're in absolute awe. The plane is just humongous. I don't know, how is it? You look at it and you wonder, how is it that thing is flying? You know? And once you look at the size of the engine, then you realize how it's flying. I'm going to show you a photo of a 767 with the landing gear system. And I want you to see with... I'm going to kind of blow it up here a little bit. That way you're able to see it better. My face doesn't need to be in it, right? Here is a photo of the Air France 767. As you can see, the wheels down below, they're huge, they're massive. That tug is actually pulling that aircraft. It's taxiing along somewhere. I don't know which airport this is at. But it's got those 6 bogies sticking out of it. So it's 6 on one side, 6 on the other to be able to distribute the weight. The 777 300 was going to be produced, and the 777 200 were going to be produced in a brand new facility that Boeing had actually built. 777 was going to be the first aircraft with fly-by-wire, and it was also incorporating the glass cockpit from the 767 that it was also done. The military had also looked at the 777 to replace Air Force One, which is the 747 fleet, but they still wanted to see how they really want to have a 4-engine job. So the 747-800, the last ones that are coming out are going to be Air Force One aircraft. The 777 will eventually replace the KC-10 tanker. So you will see the KC-10 disappear into the sunset. To date, 1,729 aircraft have been built of the 777. The aircraft is really being produced far and wide. There's really not much more I can say about this plane, but this plane was a technological marvel. The 777-200 and the 300. Now, Emirates Airlines is actually one of the largest owners of the fleet of 777s. Uh, a 777-200ER named Super Ranger broke the Great Circle distance without landing record for an airline. On April 2nd of 1997, they took delivery of the aircraft that flew eastward from Boeing Field, Seattle to Kuala Lumpur, a distance of 10,000 nautical miles. The 777 200ER has a 45,000 U.S. gallons qualification. Emirates is the largest purchaser of this aircraft. They love the plane. 78 of their aircraft, they have the largest fleet of all the 777 customers. Theirs is broken up into business class and sleeper class, and they also have a coach class. Their business class, when you're sitting inside the aircraft, it's like you're sitting in a little cubicle. You've got your bed and everything like that, and they actually set your bed up, and it's an overnight flight to Saudi Arabia and to Qatar and all that area. Qatar also services the 777. They also service pretty much every country out there. In every airline, the 777 flies in some sort of capacity. The aircraft was used during the build-up to the Gulf War, transporting troops and mail. So, 767 and the 777 working tandem together. Also, the 777 has the same window structure as the 767. If you look at it, you can't see that. Now, in the back of the 777, you would actually notice that the aircraft is going through many different design changes. Eventually, the 767 will no longer be produced, but the 777 is going to be living on. They're going into the 777X program, which will actually have a longer wingspan. This aircraft is going to be much bigger in terms of wing length. So it's going to be a 777-300. The body's going to be a little bit longer, but it's the reason they're calling it the X. I believe it's going to be the 400 series. It's going to have the longest wingspan of any aircraft structure ever built. It's going to have folding wingtips. Right now, it's still going through testing. The aircraft has not been delivered as of yet. Right now, the plane is still seeing its little list of problems, typical of Boeing at this point. But, you know, when you're producing so many different aircraft and you're trying to meet deadlines, you're going to run into problems, no matter what company you're with. Whether it be Airbus or Boeing or Lockheed, they're all finding problems with, they're called teething issues. And there's a reason why they have. Now, in this photo here, you actually see the two different models. The wing is now incorporating more of a carbon fiber look. The wings are being offered with more carbon. The 787 broke that barrier. So the 777 is going to be doing more carbon fiber into the structure of the aircraft, reducing the weight of the plane, but also incorporating more strength in the wing. As you can see, the wing is a lot longer on the 777X, which is the one I believe is going to be the 400 series. And it's going to, the wing tips are actually, as that swoop comes out, those wing tips are going to be folding up, because that way airports don't have to accommodate. So when all these big airplanes come into play, like the A380, airports had to spend millions and billions of dollars to accommodate the A380 because it was such a massive aircraft. It is a massive aircraft and it costs a lot more to run. Boeing foresaw that the 747 engine aircraft was going to disappear. Eventually, it's not going to be it. There will be no more Queens of the Skies. This aircraft here is going to be replacing the Queen of the Skies. the 777, the new A350 or the A340s. The A340 will be gone too, as a 4-engine aircraft. So that is tonight's broadcast. Just one more thing, the KC 777 will probably come into play in the next years coming up. Just to let you, my final thoughts on Boeing aircraft. We're not going to be talking about Boeing aircraft anymore. 777 was the last of the conversations that we were going to have. I know I said I was going to have a conversation about the 737. There's so much going on with the 737 that everybody else is covering it, and really, there's really not much I can say about it. My feelings on the issues with Boeing and the 737, it all comes down to training. And some people train well, some people don't train very well. But those are my thoughts on that. I'm really not going to touch base on what happened with the 737 program. I'm not going to go into the 787. Again, that is a future aircraft. There's so much out there, but I really wanted to touch base with the older model, the 777, the 767, the 747, the 727, the 707, and everything before that, which were the prop-driven aircraft. And I wanted you guys to see that Boeing has been building airliners, and they've been cutting edge for so long, and they'll still continue to be cutting edge. You know, they're an American company, and just like Airbus, there'll be always that rival back and forth. But in the next week's program, we're going to be touching base. Not only did Boeing, before Airbus became the rival to Boeing, there were other rivals within the country building airliners. Not a lot of people talk about that. There were companies like Convair, Consolidated, which later became Convair. There was Convair, Lockheed, and McDonnell Douglas. Next week's program, we're going to touch base on the L-1011, the Lockheed L-1011. It was known as the Whisper Liner, and I'll tell you why it was named the Whisper Liner in next week's program. Next week's program is going to be, again, at the same time. We will talk about the L-1011 and all the controversies that ended up happening with the L-1011. Some good, some bad. We'll talk about some of their most famous incidents that happened with that aircraft. And then the week after that one, just to give you guys a heads up, we are going to touch base with another aircraft that was the very first regional jet style aircraft to compete against the 727 and the 737 from McDonnell Douglas, which would be the DC-9 into the MD-87. Okay, and we're going to talk about that one, not next weekend, but the weekend after next. But L-1011, Lockheed L-1011, we will talk about it. It is a tri-jet, just like the 777 was supposed to be, which is very funny. That photo is very interesting, how that engine would have been on top, and it looked just like a DC-10. But I'm glad that Boeing decided to go away from the tri-jet series. There were a lot of flaws with the DC-10, and a lot of them were very public when the aircraft came out. But the L-1011 was a special plane. It was a plane with many hopes and dreams that went with it. And I flew on the L-1011 quite a number of times. And it was an airplane that was able to go in and out of smaller airports like LaGuardia or Fort Lauderdale, FLL, which is down here in Florida. And it was an airplane that had a futuristic look to it. But again, that will be for next week's program. Again, if you're watching this on playback, again, if you like the program, please hit the thumbs up button. Subscribe if you're not a subscriber, if this is your first time watching it. Please, if you guys actually have a chance, share this video. Share it on social media. Helps me out a lot. And also to Trevor, thank you for becoming my first Patreon supporter and following me on Patreon. I really do appreciate it. And you'll see more photos of me on Patreon. Again, I'd much rather post on Patreon than Facebook and X. But I want to be able to give you guys the content that I so much enjoy. Went flying today, just a little short thing. I went flying today. It was windy as heck. I'll put out a video about my flight. I flew the Twin Otter. The wind was everywhere. I was able to fly my glider. Had a good flight in the morning, but as soon as I landed the glider, the wind picked up, and I decided to fly the Otter. It was only like a 2 or 3 flight, quick flight, and that's it. Hopefully next week it'll be a better weather. But next week will be Memorial Day, and we give thanks to the fallen. But we will talk about the L-1011. With that being said, thank you very much for watching tonight, and thank you very much to all of my supporters here on YouTube. Thank you for subscribing to the channel, but if you are, again, first time, please subscribe. If you like the content, hit the thumbs up button. It helps me out a lot. Again, have a great night and a good week. Hope you all work is good for you all, and we will see you next week. Have a good one, everyone. Model Man Frank out. Talk to y'all later. Good night.